Now that the third major trailer for Hideo Kojima's upcoming mind-bending epic Death Stranding has made the rounds online, the speculation about the game has hit a feverish pitch. Perhaps this is a symptom of one of gaming's greatest minds being so cryptic and vague about the details, since being vague by its very nature does leave room for all types of speculation. But in any case, the internet rumor mill has seen interesting suspicions surface, most of which cite elements of Metal Gear Solid 5's development as evidence of the claims. Recent claims being explored on internet forums include, but are not limited to, the idea that Kojima is not only taking his time with his role in seeing that his projects get to the finish line, but that he is also just plain wasteful with money trusted to him by his publishers, and perhaps Konami is better off without him after all. To anybody who witnessed the controversies surrounding Kojima and Konami near the end of development of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, this is definitely a major switch from where the general consensus was on which party was to blame for the fallout at the time. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. As more information becomes available, it's reasonable to revisit your conclusions on things, right? But given the points that are generally brought up to support the idea that Kojima is some kind of money-wasting time slouch with game development, could the concern have any real credibility? It was no secret that Metal Gear Solid 5 saw a tumultuous development cycle, perhaps much more tumultuous than the average development cycle for a AAA video game, with some claims of overworked employees, extremely strict work environment policies, expensive, redundant rewrites of content that was never used, and of course, the delays that Kojima insisted on, despite Konami not entirely agreeing. One of the main sources that is pointed to by Kojima dissenters is the comments made by Rika Morinaka, one of the composers from the Metal Gear Solid series, who attested that Kojima was usually paid at a fixed rate and had no personal stake in making sure the production didn't exceed budgetary confines, and would assign multiple pieces of music to be written and rewritten just to end up not being used anyway. From Konami's perspective, sure, this can be seen as wasteful, but from the creative perspective, it could just as easily be argued that this is part of the creative process. You generally don't get the content you want without first disposing of things you don't need. It's not an exact science. Muranaka went on later to elaborate on her points about Kojima by saying she still supports Kojima, Konami, and the Metal Gear Solid franchise, and repeatedly made the point that there is no ill will on her end whatsoever, and she feels she was taken out of context. I personally don't think the concept of Kojima being more focused on getting the creative end of the game the way he wants it correct than the business side of it is really that surprising. After all, Kojima's job was not to run Konami, that's Konami's job. Kojima's job was to make Metal Gear Solid 5 a great game, which he did. And besides, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain ended up making $179 million 24 hours after launch, which was double the cost of production. So at the end of the day, I would say that's a pretty good outcome. If somebody told me they could double my money in 24 hours, I would take that investment every time. Plus, if working conditions were really so unbearable, I'm curious as to why so many of the people that worked under Kojima left with him when he departed Konami Studios. Metal Gear controversies aside, the real reason these theories are starting to surface is because Death Stranding, Kojima's new post-Konami era PlayStation exclusive project, is still in the oven, and we haven't seen anything other than a few cryptic trailers that just seem to give rise to more questions than answers. This is a typical tactic of Kojima, and for Death Stranding, it's on steroids. Personally, I'm enjoying the ride, and I think the trailer reveals are fun, but I understand why they have created space for rumors to get out of control. To be fair, Death Stranding is probably still in the relatively early stages of development. Most games aren't announced until some progress has already been made, but we found out about Kojima's newest project right at the beginning, so perhaps that is part of why it seems to be taking longer than it should. At first glance, once the criticism reaches Kojima, he defended his development style after the Game Awards last year by saying, "I've been reading a lot on the internet of people saying I've spent the last year traveling around and having fun. A lot of people saying I'm wasting time and money, but that couldn't be further from the truth. So over the past year, we've been working on Decima. There are things we don't know, we ask them, we make some requests on our end. Of course, we use the Decima engine very differently from the way they use it, especially when it comes to cutscenes. So we make our own things there, and we send it to them, show it to them, get their feedback. We are at that pace currently. There's been a lot lot of stuff going on through this time, so it makes me pretty sad when people say, oh, you're just having fun and joking around and wasting money. You could ask so many people, but I really think that I'm doing this pretty fast. If you have a company and you already have an engine, you already have the tools and the team together, and even then, it's pretty standard for AAA games to take 3 or 5 years to develop. For some games, it can take up to 10. Kojima is correct about that. This basically confirms what I'm saying about the situation. There's a lot that goes into making a game these days, and even more when you consider the state of affairs facing Kojima for this particular project. Learning a new engine, developing new relationships, moving all of his talent and resources to new studios, and everything else that's involved in his current evolution, I'm actually a little shocked that he's as far along as he seems to be. Releasing 3 trailers isn't something you do if you don't already have an idea of what the game is going to be. So even though we aren't seeing as much as we would like to see of Death Stranding, I suspect he may be further along than we realize. So whatever your thoughts on Kojima's style of game development, I think it's safe to say that Death Stranding and future Kojima projects will likely take more time than average. Kojima is nothing if not a perfectionist, and even though his marketing style involved lots of teasing and unclear, misleading hints, we can be sure that he will not release his games until they're ready. And that's more than can be said for some developers out there these days. To say the money to achieve the end goal of an excellent Kojima game is wasted doesn't seem to hold water if the game ends up making a profit and pleasing the audience in the end. If both creative and business appetites are ultimately satisfied, what more could we really ask for?
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.